Ayushi, you can start the session. This is also live on YouTube, so don't worry about the attendance.
Okay, great. So I'll start directly at 6, or should I start right now?
Your call.
Okay, I'll just start.
Yeah.
Okay. So hello everyone, I'm Ayushi Jain. I'm currently a second year student in the 3-year LLB course at Bangalore, NLS Bangalore. And we are holding this session today because exactly in around 2 months, you now have on 17th March, you have your NLSAT 2024. And we would like to guide you around how you should spend these last 2 months of prep, and how you should orient your strategy towards the exam. A lot of people know about the exam now. This is unlike the first time when I gave, where this is around the time that most people even started considering giving the exam. So a lot of us gave the exam with 2 months of prep only. But having said that, even if you're someone who is about to begin your prep now, I would say you still have time, and I will go through what all components you need to cover for the exam, how you can go about them, how you go about practice, what should be your main focus in these last 2 months. If you're someone who's been preparing for the exam in the past, like for the past few months as well, how do you now concentrate all these efforts? When is the time to start giving mocks and all of those things? Beginning with just the exam pattern. So, well, there are people who might be aware of the exam pattern as well. I'd just like to run through it briefly. The exam pattern in detail is available on the NLS website, and anyone who wants to give this exam, I would like my number first suggestion would be you first just go and read the exam pattern well, because uh it could do two things. Number one, it will assuage some kind of concerns based on memory, because a lot of other law entrance exams are based on memorizing a lot of facts and information, such as your law codes like IPC, your contracts principles, your torts principles, and things like that. This is not what the NLSAT exam is about. It is not about memorization of information. And for a lot of people, since memorization is the problem, like this exam pattern is really helpful. And this is also why this exam pattern is doable in 2 months. On this, like having said that though, part B of the exam, which is about writing subjective answers, writing essay type answers. That is a big concern for a lot of people. I've been getting a lot of queries on that as well, on how to tackle part B, how to write essay answers, how to write like essay answers oriented towards legal reasoning. And this might be an issue of concern for some people, and that fairly so. But having said that, if you practice now, if you look at the kind of legal reasoning questions that come, they're very like, well, it's term legal reasoning. At the end of the day, it is how you logically think through problems, like think through conflict situations, and do that, right? So having like just go through the pattern once very well, and you'll then realize, also it'll help you gain what your strengths are, what are not. Can I ask others to please mute themselves as soon as they join? So having said, yeah. And so that's basically the pattern. Read the pattern well. Um, there are two parts to the paper. There's part A, which is the MCQ questions. In this, you will have passages, reading comprehension passages. Part A is a lot like your CLAT recent like subjective, sorry, your recent CLAT examination comprehension passages, because it has like around 7 to 8 questions for each passage. These are English questions, these are logical reasoning questions, and these are GK questions. On English questions, the English tends to not be overly complex. It's not a lot of like very complicated grammar or very complicated synonyms and all. There are synonyms, there is grammar, but it's not very complex. It's very preliminary. So for English, if you do these reading like there, I don't think that you should be doing specific English prep in these last 2 months at all. I think reading the newspapers regularly, which is something you will be doing for your GK prep anyways, reading your like just attempting essay questions, so that your part A prep is a little more yeah, like just attempting comprehension questions to build on speed and all will help you with your English prep through the way, especially if you're someone who's comfortable with English as a second language. If English is not a language that you're very comfortable in, then maybe you'll need to spend some more time on reading comprehensions and some more time on that. But specific grammar prep and all is not something that I would advise spending these last 2 months on, because the English questions don't necessarily require an in-depth prep on that. Then moving on to your logical reasoning questions. Now, these are the kind of questions which are around the
AirPods बिना से? AirPods. वो
yes. So your logical reasoning questions in part A, this requires some prep because these are not necessarily very intuitive. Uh, in the sense that these are questions like, what are the assumptions? What are the correct assumptions? If the author is saying one sentence, if an author is making a particular statement or a particular claim, there are certain assumptions behind that claim. So you'll have 4 options. Maybe you need to pick one which is not true, or maybe you need to pick one which is true. A very, very common mistake is that sometimes questions use negative language in the sense which of this would not be true if this was true, or which of this is not necessarily what the author is saying. And we tend to overlook the not when we are reading, especially when we are speed reading in an exam. So in that scenario, so just be very, very mindful of reading your questions well, and because that change like completely flips your answer, especially for a logical reasoning answer. Logical reasoning, another problem that is often faced is that sometimes to us, the options in a logical reasoning question look very close. In the sense, we are confused between two options. It could be B or C. So, logical reasoning, that's why requires a little more close prep in that regard, because while these are close answers, these are not necessarily, it does not necessarily mean that both of them are equally right. There is going to be one which is closer to the question than the other. It might not be completely wrong, but it doesn't mean that it's right. Like there's still a better option that you could have picked and you should have picked. So again, logical reasoning questions are like these assumptions. What would be what would be a statement that the author would agree with? So this is you reading the passage carefully, seeing what the author is trying to say. Sometimes the passage is a lot more complicated than what the questions it asks is. We don't have to do such a deep reading of the passage to be able to answer most questions in a part A question. And deep reading would in fact take away from time that you don't have, because it's a limited, like the exam is for 2.5 hours. You would need at least a good hour to attempt your part B, hour and a little more than that, I would say. So on a balance, like you should be able to complete your part A in around 1 hour 15 minutes, 1 hour 20 minutes. And this is also taking into account the time it will take you to fill in a OMR sheet. And an OMR sheet does require like 5 minutes to spend, because you can't also uh, just do that in haste, because an OMR sheet needs to be filled in a specific way so that the computer can easily detect that in your answers right. If you don't do your OMR sheet right, then that's just, there's no way of getting back from it, because you need to fill it with a pen, you need to fill those circles in if you've filled it wrong. So the OMR sheet also requires a lot of patience, and you can't rush through that. In fact, before attempting your part B, because your part A is also a qualifying part, uh, an OMR sheet needs to be filled. And for that, my like suggestion to everyone in general is that if you've never used an OMR sheet in your life before, while doing your mocks, like just print one from the internet and try filling them. If you fill them for the first time, you'll realize for yourself how it's just a very, very, like it's a clumsy task, because these are small circles. You can't color outside those circles. You have to make sure that if you have skipped the question in the question paper, then you also ensure that you skip it in the OMR. So it's very, very careful filling. You do require time for that. There are 2 questions on the chat that I'll just answer. Anything particular for pop GK? I will move on to GK right now. If you're in 12th, can you give the NLSAT 2024? No. NLSAT 2024 is a program, it's a 3-year program. It's just for people who have already have done an undergraduate degree or more. So if you're in 12th, then if you want to do law, then you pursue the CLAT examination, which is the 5-year law course. Okay. If anyone else has questions, you can always put them on the chat and I'll address them from time to time. So on logical reasoning, that was that. On GK, which is the third component of your part A questions, how to prepare logical reasoning is again, you attempt to give a lot of these. You'll find a lot of CLAT question papers online, on the net, and a lot of CLAT sample papers, a lot of CLAT question papers. There's also sample questions that NLS sends out. So you can practice from that. A lot of logical reasoning books will also have logical reasoning of the kind that, so there are entrance exams where logical reasoning also comprises questions like, if like things like if you're sitting in a circle, suppositions, family trees, and all that, that is not the kind of logical reasoning that this question asks. So don't do those. You don't have to do them. And those take a little bit more time. So if we don't have to, if you are also looking at logical reasoning books or like guides, then avoid those questions and move only to analytical reasoning questions. Critical reasoning books, so I have not necessarily prepared from a critical reasoning book before, but I've heard that R.S. Agarwal has one, and that was the one that was suggested to me earlier. I didn't necessarily go through that because I preferred going through CLAT passages because, like I said, the format seems to be very similar. So do those. Um, on GK, so GK, I will very honestly admit is not a strong point of mine. Even before I gave this exam, when I went through the pattern, the only reason I was comfortable and a little confident in this exam was because I knew that not a lot was contingent on GK, a lot was contingent on part B. And I could afford to have been a little shaky with my GK prep because my critical reasoning and my English prep was fairly good. So that is a balance that I made for myself. But other than that, how to cover the GK and what GK does does NLSAT ask? There are largely two types of questions that I remember from my time. One was the very obviously major international events. One is the impeachment of the president in Pakistan. One of them was the COP, like the climate summits. So these are very obviously major international news, major news around the world, international affairs, major national news. There were questions on, I think, the award-winning Indian authors, things like that, which is just normally when you GK prep, these kind of questions are really important. But other kind of then there's the complete opposite type of GK questions, which are questions like who is the author of this article? Is he a journalist? Is he a photographer? Very random things like that. Is that an economist who's written this author? And it's fair to say that most people don't know answers like that. You can't. So in these last 2 months, while you need to focus on GK in the sense that you need to at least know what's going on majorly, in these last 2 to 3 months of the exam, because a lot of question papers are concentrated, while the entire year is the GK cycle that comes from last year's NLSAT to this year's NLSAT, and major events usually all throughout this year. But first, smaller news, like news around awards and all, mostly they tend to veer towards the latter half and latter 3 months. Because those are fresh events. In GK, because it's also like a legal exam, keep in mind that major legal developments in India should become important. At least you should be keeping them up to date. If not for your GK, this could be something that could come become a topic for your essay questions. Things like new criminal bills being passed, or things like there's the marriage equality debate was a major one. Then things like recently in the Supreme Court, there's a major arbitration judgment. And while you don't need to go into in depth about the law in these cases, it's a good to have some legal awareness as well, considering you want to be future lawyers. So in your GK prep, orient it largely towards what is the major news that you just can't afford to miss out. On your minor news, on very specific news about, like, let's say international visits of the Prime Minister, barring the whole Lakshadweep Maldives conspiracy, sorry, the controversy right now, which might become important. I don't think you need to know about every international visit that the Prime Minister has made, which is the kind of questions a lot of examinations ask. So don't focus your time on memorizing monthly compendiums. If you feel like you have the time, if you feel like your prep in other areas is fairly covered, then maybe spend the time like skimming those. But it's impossible to like memorize all of that. On GK, a lot of us depend on trigger memory, in the sense if you have four options, you're likely to like pick one. uh but at the same time, because GK is like, when it comes to the second type of GK questions, which I told you are very obscure, everyone is more or less in the same boat. So the one thing that I comfort myself with in the exam when I find a question like that is that if I don't know it, I also know that like a lot of people are not going to know that answer. Like it's impossible that while prepping your GK, people will be going into who is the author of this article, like is that a reporter, is that an economist. I will still make a guess, because this examination has negative marking for unattempted as well as wrong answers. So there's no harm in just making a guess. It could be a wrong guess or it could be a right guess. So if I'm guessing for four questions, I'm going to assume that at least like I'm hoping that at least one of them will be right. If it's right, great for me. If it's not, then I would have gotten a minus even if I'd left that empty, right? So why not attempt it? Um, yeah, GK questions are also in the passage from, in the sense that every comprehension is followed by three types of questions: English, GK, and your critical reasoning. The GK question might flow from the topic of the passage itself, or it might not. Sometimes just randomly inserted there. So it's not in the passage form, in the sense that it's not going to be an entire passage of GK and then like questions from that, only like GK questions from that. It's going to be a comprehension, like a well-rounded comprehension, which allows them to ask you different kinds of questions. If it's a random GK question in on an unrelated topic from an unrelated passage, then don't let that throw you off. Just go with the flow, because they need to, like, it's a passage format, but they also need to ask GK in some manner. So that is on GK. I have never wanted to hedge my bets on GK, because GK, like I could prepare GK the best I could ever, and it could still be very, very complex. It could still be like there could be an obscure question anyways. So instead, I like to spend my like time in prepping things that are much more under my control. Like I can prepare and I can get better at like my better in my accuracy with English, better in my accuracy with uh, writing, sorry, with critical reasoning answers. I can prepare and get better at writing Part B answers. But I can prepare a lot for GK, and there can still be 100% guarantee that it'll work out, because the question, like, that's just the nature of GK questions. Having said that, though, like, do read, like, do go through the major news, because some of the, like, you can't also afford to not get all GK answers. Like I said, part A is a qualifying like part. They won't check your part B if you don't get a certain percentile in your part A. So at least like 40 to 50% of your GK answers you need to know, and 40 or 50% of them will be from major news. So it's like those you can't afford to not know. And the way you know them is if you haven't like done anything yet, then you go through compendiums now. I don't think it's the time to like go through daily news for everything. You also notice what the major news has been and like read a little bit more about that. Like just open up an editorial about a major news event and read that, so that it sticks, because editorial information and editorial or like literary format tends to stick with you a lot better than having just read that in a compendium somewhere. So it will just help jog up your memory. I'll just take a minute to read the questions once. Yes, this exam is for NLS Bangalore, the 3-year LLB degree. I would attempt part A first, then part B, because simply because part B is the kind of questions that can take a lot more time. Like if I have 50 minutes, I need to do them in 50 minutes, I can do them. If I have an hour and a half, I'll do them in an hour and a half. If I had 3 hours and if I lose track of time, I would do them in 3 hours, because that's just the nature of subjective questions. Part A is more directed. Part A, like they won't check your part B until you've done your part A. So attempt your part A first, get it done, then do your part B based on how much time you have. Strategize part B that way. Um, critical reasoning books and RC and CR books. Like I said, CLAT past year question papers right now is a great source for those. How to cover the current affair backlog. Like I said, a lot of like a lot of open source websites have like monthly or weekly compendiums. While they're not the best in terms, like I said, they're not the best in terms of you won't memorize a lot from those until you read them again and again and again, which I don't think you have the time right now. But a good way to go about it is like read them, identify what is a major, like what is the news that has impacted India's reputation in like positive or negative, like offline, like outside, right? Or like major events around the world which don't like necessarily involve India, but like you can't afford to not know about the Palestine-Israel conflict, things like that. So then how to improve time management. I complete part one in an hour, but still unable. So if you do part one in an hour, that is honestly amazing. But part B, 1.5 hours is enough. How to do like improve time management? I'll come to that when I do part B. I'll address that soon. How many minutes will we need for each question in part B? 7 to 8 minutes. If you have like been able to finish a part A well in time, I think that should be enough. How long we need to prepare GK? Yes, so like I said, the GK cycle is usually last year's exam to this year's exam, major events from that. So it's going to be around 11 months for this exam, but most major events are covered from the latter 6 months. Uh, how much? How many current affairs? Ton. Yes, okay. Right. So this is part A. If anyone has any like for part A, I think this one like accuracy is a big issue for like accuracy or speed. If you focus on speed, sometimes we lose on accuracy. If you focus on accuracy, we lose on speed. And that is like you can't afford to lose on either. And that is something you gain in practice. The best way to do that is to like attempt question papers, attempt mocks, and self-evaluate. If you're giving a mock by yourself at your home, time yourself and don't like I know we get a lot more lax when we are the only ones disciplining ourselves, but if like 2.5 hours is 2.5 hours, at the moment it reaches 2.5 hours, you stop it. In the examination center, like who knows, you might just be the first person on the desk and your first paper will be the first that will be taken away. And you can't really like bargain for time there. So 2.5 hours is 2.5 hours. Time yourself like diligently, honestly, you'll be doing yourself a favor if you do that right now. Um, for my strategy with any kind of examination prep is usually that when I begin, I'd go over the exam pattern. I look at what parts of it. There's a component that I'm very uncomfortable with or completely unaware of. I like to go through that, prepare with it. Then I like to give a mock, like usually. I think now would also be a good time, like unless there's a topic that you've completely not know, then you could start with giving a mock and part A past year's exam questions are available on the and like because NLS released the answer key for part A, the questions are also available. Part B questions are not available in the public domain. Part B questions are usually a lot more like, and I know that that's the prep that a lot of people are curious about, are concerned about because it's new. There's no other exam with that pattern. But only on part A right now, those last year questions can really help you gauge what kind of passages the examiners like to ask. And maybe doing them and seeing how much did you get correct will also let you know if your English answers were all right, then maybe you just need to focus on critical reasoning and GK. If your reasoning answers were all right, maybe you need to focus on something else. You need to figure out how much time you as a person are taking there so you can also focus on your speed and strategy for part B accordingly. So giving a mock is very, 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 very crucial. Um, you can join a coaching for mocks. You cannot either. Like it's honestly, it depends on how much do you think. Like because this exam does unfairly advantage like some people. Like if you're someone who's been educated in like a good English school, it will you'll usually find it easier to go through these comprehension passages. If you're someone with like an arts like a humanities background degree, then a lot of these subjective essay writing answers are intuitive to you, because these are the kind of answers that you also attempt in your undergrad degrees, as opposed to a science major who's like not used to giving subjective writing answers, or answers that require like a lot of social and moral and ethical thinking at the core of it. So it does benefit some people. If you're one of those people who thinks that this plays to your strength, you probably don't need a coaching. But I think practice is something that everyone requires, just because of how uncertain this exam is. The way you go to practice is you can either pull up resources from the net, questions, sample questions, and just practice them. Evaluate them yourself, yes, but if there's a part B question, have someone else evaluate it for you, because it's hard to find your own mistakes because you're used to that writing style. But if you ask someone else to read it for you and grade you on it, you will know better about, is this reading smoothly? Are your arguments clear? Are your arguments logical at all? Is there like a leap in argument that you have made and you were not able to identify because in your head that's just a given like assumption, but that might not be clear to someone else, but that needs to become clear on the paper. So having a second party check your paper is very, very important, to be able to incorporate that feedback in your answers on a rolling basis is important. And you can like take the help of coachings for that. You cannot. NLTI offers like just a mock series as well as like a proper course on and NLSAT. And if you choose, you can also always enroll in just the mock series to help you through your strategy, like help you through your practice. Uh, if you want someone else to check the paper, but you don't have that kind of support right now around you, in the sense people are not free to check that for you, etc., then that's always a good option. There are also other coachings out there, but like not many that I know right now. Since this is the one that I'm associated with, this is the one I can vouch for. But other than that, prop so part A, this is that. On part B, again, two types of questions. There's an essay question, or this is 15-mark essay question, which is around, it can be anything and everything. It can be around social issues. It can be around like I know there have been questions around technology, AI. There can be questions around cryptocurrency. It can be very, very varied. But rest assured, it's not going to be something that was like completely like, it's going to be a topic of debate or a topic of discussion that is prominent. So like they're expecting you to also have some kind of social awareness around issues around you. So um even if it's like a topic you're not necessarily trained in, like you might not know much about technology, you might not know much about AI, you might not know much about like particular kinds of like, let's say there might be. So the difference in pattern is that when I gave the exam, we had a 15-mark essay question around a legal, like, sorry, around a current affair question. So it was around the worker bills, like the labor bills that had been passed, around migration and things like that, like one nation, one election, things like that. Now it's no longer based on a GK issue, but it will be, at the end of the day, it will hit at some socio-economic or like some socio-political issue. And as long as you're able to identify the core of that issue, you can build arguments on that. So I might not need to know exactly how cryptocurrency works to know how cryptocurrency is a concern for governments, in the sense that like governments have the monopoly to issue currency and regulate it, and how cryptocurrency is difficult to regulate because of like its anonymization and things like that. There are no it's been spreading without any kinds of like rules or regulations regulating it. So how regulation is an issue, how once any source of income is not regulated, what kind of like problems it can lead to, right? It can lead to political problems wherein you don't have like funds accounted for political campaigns. It can lead to all kinds of shady transactions. It can lead to uh problems with your like terrorism funding and things like that. So just, and this is like having known absolutely nothing about like exactly how the technicalities of cryptocurrency functioning are, or things like AI, how AI works for well. Like it's good or bad in the sense that it can be good, it can like assist humans in a lot of ways, it can assist people with disabilities in a lot of ways, it can just replace a lot of mundane labor and make life so much more easier and better. But at the same time, there are risks again of regulation. If your AI gets too smart, then uh, there's nothing stopping it from also being used for nefarious purposes. Who is stopping that? So all of those, like, these are debates, and I don't need to know anything about like exactly how artificial intelligence focuses to know this is the socio-economic or social political issue at the core of it, which the examiner is trying to assess me on. So this is how you like deal with your 15-mark essay questions. You practice right now, practice with the like structure your answer essays well. If this is a 15-mark essay on something, how do you best, and this is the only place where you can display your personality. Your legal reasoning answers, you will have to work with the facts that were given to you. On your comprehension, you are obviously working with limited options of answers. This is free terrain. How do you display your personality best? How do you get your most marks? Structure your answers well. Start with an introduction on the topic. In your main body of analysis, give both sides of the debate a chance to like weigh the merits and demerits of the topic. See what are the valid concerns of different stakeholders. Is there a conflict here which you think is genuinely like reasonable? For example, if it's a marriage equality debate, I don't think the concern that this will break families or this will be detrimental to children is a valid concern, because that's my opinions, that's my politics, that's what I personally believe in. So while in my essay I will write that the other side's concerns are that this will lead to the breakdown of family as an institution, this will lead to like this will create problems in like how children are raised. My the reason, like I will mention it, but like in the very next breath I will also, like in the next paragraph or in my analysis, so my essay will always contain my personal opinions on that as well, because it shows that not only am I someone who has read about the topic, but I've also thought about the topic. Because reading is just not enough. Like it's not enough for me as a person living in the society to just know what's happening. I'm a person who, like, I'm a student, I'm a person aspiring to be a lawyer, so obviously I've thought about it as well. I hold some opinions as an individual, and can I defend my opinions? So I think in an essay is a good place to express that. So my conclusion like will always also be around the lines of, in this, like, I think this stakeholder has an important concern. I'll say these are their concerns, and I think the concern of like the LGBTQ community in terms of equality, in terms of like dignity, are a lot more valid and justified than the unfounded, ungrounded concerns of like the people opposing that, saying this will lead to breakdown of marriage as a social institution, or like children's upbringing, because that just means that you want children to be like to grow up in such like with certain gender roles in their like mind, or you want a marriage institution of a marriage where like one of them is a male, where patriarchy is thus facilitated, and that is not what I think is a valid social institution to protect. I don't think any kind of institution which pushes gender roles or which pushes patriarchy or which pushes for homophobia is a good social institution to protect. So I don't think the stakeholders' concern is a valid concern. So that is how I go about then dealing with an essay question. And having said that, how do you prepare for your essay question? Because this is also a prep strategy session. So then you pick up these controversial topics from newspapers. A lot of these you'll find the abortion, like the adoption debate, you'll find the abortion debate, you'll find yeah, adoption, abortion, these are just two, I don't know why, but at the top of my head, the marriage equality debate, debates on women in army, things like that. So pick these up from your editorials, from your main issues. Also pick environmental questions, pick tech questions, like crucial tech questions, and pick questions like, collegium versus your national NJC, things like that, and just write. Like the only way to get better at writing is writing, and having someone check that. Um, I have like I'll go through the questions in like a few minutes, but so that's how you start preparing. And Sorry. Yeah. And again, get these checked by a third person. Uh, Ideally get your essays checked by two people, see if what you were saying made sense to them, see, and also discuss these topics, right? If someone is checking and someone scored you like well or not well, ask them what about the essay like was like right good to like read, uh what make them think more, because an essay that leaves someone thinking more is always good. Like you always want to like you know like people should not just get an overview of the topic from an essay. An essay should include some like reasoning, some sort of, like I said, it's the only place for you to show your personality in. So do reflect that. um if you haven't joined the coaching, how do you get your answers assessed? Ask your friends, ask people like I know professors is too much to ask, like in the sense they might not be available or want to do that. But I think generally a good idea to ask friends or like your siblings or like just your support people around you to also like see if there's like if I like I know a couple of my friends who are really good at writing, so I thought that those would be good people to ask for feedback on. It's the same way if you're filling any graduate applications and you need someone to like proofread your SOP. It's think of it like that. So that's like the idea of having it checked by someone else is to know that even if I was sending it to someone who is not aware of the topic, were they able, like was my essay able to like inculcate some information to them, were they able to understand it like fundamentally, and was I able to give three things, like ask them to check you on three parameters, right? Did it read well, was it structured well, or was it all over the place in the sense like I'm making an argument here, then I'm making an opinion, then I'm going back to an argument, then I'm including a fact. Like that's not how it should be. Always a good idea to include examples in your essays as well, by the way. So it if like it there should be a particular there's an introduction, there's a conclusion. My conclusion always leads to either a solution or like a weighing of the debate or like my opinion. In the middle, I'm talking about different stakeholders, I'm laying out the factual scenarios, I'm laying out examples. So is that read like is the structure well? Then was I able to like ask them like to check you on these three parameters? Second being were they able to was I able to give them an overview of the debate from like all the sides or not? And thirdly, did my conclusion, did my analysis make sense? Like, or did I jump some, like, did I make some jumps in reasoning or not? And if like those three things you're able to meet, then more or less you're on the right path. Um, with 2 months, how much essay writing you should be doing? See, I would say first do focus on your part A, considering it's a qualifier. But having said that, like writing requires a little more regular practice for it to become a habit. And you're also working, like usually by the time you're on your essay question, you've what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I went in the exam thinking, hey, I'll have like 20 minutes for my essay. I ended up writing it in like 7 to 8 minutes, barely there. Like I remember my last sentence must have been incomplete by the time the paper was taken away from me. But that's just how you like, that's just going to be the nature of it. It's the last question in the paper, it will take time. Uh, so no, like also give yourself that limited time when you're practicing. Give yourself 15 to 10 minutes to write an essay and then get it checked, because we can always write a great essay. We have like an hour to think of it, but we don't. Um, then moving on to your legal reasoning questions. Now, these, they have two very important things here. Read the question very carefully. You don't have a lot of time, I know, but reading it is important because number one, there are two things that you do while you're reading. Number one is that you identify the facts that are very, very relevant. And number two, you identify what side you want to argue for. A lot of these questions will ask you to pick a side or like be like, if you're the judge, who would you like argue for? Or in this situation, who do you think was right? Or will this person be able to claim this kind of remedy in the situation or not? So they're asking you, like, from the facts in the situation that was given to you, they are asking you to pick a side and argue for it. And you need to make that decision when you're reading the question, because you can't afford to write an answer, feel like, oh no, this is not right, and then switch sides. You don't have that time. So, and a lot of times the side that you pick will also, like, what am I more, like, I have been able to identify facts relevant to the question, to my answer, and what side do I think I can twist them in favor of. Mostly, some of these facts are twistable both sides, because these questions, like, they're not necessarily expecting you to pick a particular side. Like, you have the freedom to pick either. And I don't think the examiners judge you on what side you pick. Some questions, of course, there's like a lot more, but like some questions are skewed. And you have to admit that, like, some questions just are skewed, and you don't have to view that with suspicion. Okay, this seems like more in favor of that. Like, should I not? Or should I? Just go with it. Like, intuitively, whatever side comes first to you, look at the facts again, see if you can do it, and do that. Um, aim for, like, I think the site says around 300 to 350 words is what they're looking for in your these answers. Um, I would say a good 2 to 3 arguments you'll be able to make for one side, because you remember that you can't bring in law from outside. You have to work with the facts and the law that are provided to you in the problem. They don't want legal knowledge from outside. So with that information that you're working, what is more important than like the number of arguments that you put is the kind of arguments and how you're able to show your thought process. In the sense that if the question is this person liable in this situation or not? My answer will be, this person is, like, if I'm saying this person is liable, I will give because, firstly, this happened, which shows that this maybe is like, or they did their best at avoiding the like this. And after this point, it was the responsibility of the other person. So it's not enough to say that because they did this, they are not liable. Like, you have to show exactly why, like, you have to reason it out. And best to assume that, like, write every step of your thought process, in the sense that um I'll do that like I think it's best to give an example there, otherwise it will look like I'm speaking at the air. But a past year question was that I owe money to someone, that someone is a goon, and he's threatened me that if I don't pay him money, he will kill me. 5 days later, I've still not been able to repay. He comes to my home with a lathi and knocks heavily. I open the door, I'm scared, I start running. He runs after me. I go to my terrace and he's cornered me and I fall. Sorry, I jump. Now, can I sue him for like injury? I answered yes. And like then they say that the other person is claiming that he never threatened, so he can't be liable. He was just like, he was there, he never verbally threatened this person. So in this case, how do I make my argument, right? I'm saying that yes, this goon is liable for my injuries because he might not have verbally threatened me on this occasion. He made a threat in the past. I had still not paid my money. He said he will kill me. He was there with a lathi. He cornered me on the terrace. It was safe to assume that the threat that he had given me in the past was also functioning right now, because so I would like, it's relevant for me that the threat is functioning, right? That's one thing. The second thing, he doesn't have to verbally threaten me for his actions to be threatening. He was there with a lathi. He was banging on my door. He like, he didn't just, he cornered me when he saw I was scared. He didn't stop. He came after me all the way to the terrace. There also he came up to me. So at that point, it's like he doesn't have to speak any words for me to be threatened. His actions are threatening enough. So I have laid down the reasons. I've reasoned it out. I don't necessarily think that you do okay, so you don't have to put, there are two ways of using facts in the answer, right? A lot of people begin their questions by saying that this happened, in the sense that they will say that this goon came to his house, and in the past he had borrowed money from him, and mm, after 5 days, like after he gave a threat in the past, after 5 days he came to his home, and then he did this. I think he is liable because, now this is just a reproduction of the question. You don't have to use facts in that way, because you're using space, you're using time. But the way I use the facts, in the sense that I know this fact was already given in the question, but I'm using it in a particular way, right? I am saying him running after me to the terrace shows that he cornered me and was threatening me. I'm saying that he gave a threat in the past, and it is a continuing threat, and it is still operating today. So it's irrelevant if he gave me a verbal threat right now or not. So I have used the fact in the question. only I've used it to support my answer. And like I said, this is an example of like a situation which is like it's a skewed answer in the sense that if I had to argue on the other side in this one, I would have to think a lot more in how to use this fact. How do I say that the threat in the past was not operating right now, right? How do I say that while I was behind him because I wanted my money, I was not behind him to like threatening to kill him. That was just an empty threat. Like, how do I make that argument? It's hard. So this is an example of one of those cute type situations. I'll just take a pause here and just read a lot of questions because they've accumulated. Um, yeah, how to approach part B answers. Do we need to decide on a side and convince the examiner, or we can just examine both sides? Don't examine both sides, decide on a side and convince the examiner. That is exactly what the question is asking you to do. Um, so arrive at a certain resolution because most like that is what the question will say, decide. Unless like the question is like assess the merits of both their case. In which case you would, I think, give both, but I'm like, it's unlikely that that will be a question. Is one page answer enough for part B? More than enough. Like, honestly, they are saying 350 words. That is, and the way the question booklet is like one part of the question booklet is the question, and one side of it has a blank paper that you can write your answer in. Um, just give me a second. Someone is not on mute. Yes. Okay. So in that space, I know while 250 words is the minimum you would might want to write in a 300 to 350 word limit they've said. But a lot of questions I do feel that even less works in the sense that if I had 2 points to make and I make them well, I just made them concise. I don't think there's any harm in that because like maybe I could use that time to work on another answer, which was a little more trickier, which might have needed more than 200, 250, 300 words. But it's fine. Like they're not going to count every word that you're writing. But the general idea is that they don't want you to write elaborate answers. They just want you to be able to identify the main arguments and like give your thought process on how you think that can help, which is what you'll do as lawyers. You'll end up using the facts in a particular way to benefit the party that you're arguing for. Are 2 months enough? I do think it's enough. Having said that, first thing in the line should be giving a mock, assessing your strengths, weaknesses, working on your weaknesses, giving a mock again, looking at your accuracy. Um, what are possible ways to increase the probability of cracking it, considering the unpredictable? While it might be unpredictable, I think their expectations are pretty clear in the sense they're expecting people to be able to, reason. At the end of the day, this is an exam which wants to see how do you reason out conflict and how do you explain it. It doesn't need you to use complicated words. In fact, avoid them. Like the simpler your language, the better you're able to explain is what I genuinely believe. And a lot of professors there also believe that. So it checks out that that's the kind of paper they would want to set. Doesn't inculcating personal opinion in the essay run into the risk of being at odds with the examiner's old political bias? I would say unless it's like, sure, but number one, I really think that as long as your personal opinion is substantiated by a good reason. So my like when I said write your personal opinion in the essay, I didn't just mean to say that, like I gave the example, right? My opinion was not just that, hey, I don't believe in family as an institution or as a social institution. So I don't think that's a genuine concern. Just give LGBTQ community their rights. Because that's just like, that's just me making an opinion, but I can't back with any kind of reasoning. But if my opinion is that I don't think family is a valid social institution or a relevant social institution in this debate, because I think um, the kind of family we are looking at is an oppressive patriarchal family which wants to reinforce gender identities, gender roles in a family setting, and that is really harmful instead of being beneficial. And if that is the institution that you're dealing with, then I don't think that people whose concerns are dignity and equality should be sidelined for such an institution. So in that case, my personal opinion is substantiated with the kind of reasoning. And in that case, even if it's opposite, like, so this is like also how you deal with like opposite opinion in your life, right? Like someone might have different political opinions than mine, but if they're able to give me relevant, legitimate reasoning for why they have that opinion, then I might not agree with them, but I still respect it. So that is exactly how I think examiners also work. As long as you're able to, like, no one's going to penalize you for having an opinion as long as it's a founded opinion. So ground it in some reasoning. Don't just make blanket statements. If you think the patriarchal family is good, if at all you think that, give me reasons why you think that. Give me reasons why that is a greater concern than like the equality of certain individuals. So don't just make statements, because that will not do you any favor, but substantiate them, right? um this could be things like I'm forgetting like this one topic in the past where I felt like both sides had fairly enough, like they had good enough reasons. For example, if you look at migration is a debate, like it is fair for the Northeast to say that, hey, we have a certain uh, cultural demographic which is now being skewed massively. And okay, yeah, I think this is a good example of how both sides, both stakeholders have valid concerns and how you like then display your personal opinion there. So in a migration debate, for example, in the Northeast, I believe that it's a very, very valid concern. Demographic shift is huge, and there is like this statistics about how that has impacted their culture, it has impacted the environment, it has impacted the economy, and how that's like led to them being sidelined in their own uh, territories. At the same time, if you are a migrant who's being politically persecuted or like religiously persecuted, you don't have an option. Like literally, you don't want to be a refugee, you don't want to migrate, you don't. But if you don't have good economic options in your home country, you don't want to do that, but you do it because at the end of the day, you're a human who wants to survive. So that's a valid concern. How do you deal with this concern then, right? In this case, your personal opinion can look like, I get that migration is a concern, but a country's or a government's responsibilities lie to their own citizens. And in this case, that's why they should prioritize. Having said that, maybe having like better or relocation, like different relocations for migrants or things like better, you know, temporary or like until things get better, maybe we can treat them better while not giving them nationality status or whatever. You can make arguments like that. Or you can say that I believe that at the end, like while demographic and cultural shifts are concerns, I think nothing is a bigger concern than human survival and like just being kind to people, even if they don't belong to your nationality at the end of the day. So you can make that argument, or you can make an argument like both are valid concerns, and you can't pick between, like it's hard to pick between these two for you. But having said that, the responsibility lies on the government to be able to like, how does it protect the minorities while also uh, not, persecuting migrants or things like that. So you can like take solution oriented, or you can take just side oriented approaches. They can be different from the examiner's political bias, but if as long as you reason it out, I think that's fine. How many minimum reasons? I mean, two, I would say, in Part B legal questions. Two, you'll be able to identify in every question, that I can say. Some questions you'll be able to identify three, or maybe the third one is not very well, like you don't have a lot of facts to work on for the third one. If you have the time, put it on there. But like prioritize the one that you have like facts in favor for, in the sense that you know that you can use this fact well with this reasoning. Prioritize writing that in your order. Are 150, 160 words enough? I mostly give 4 to 5 arguments, but write only these many words. 4 to 5 arguments is a lot to identify in a limited legal reasoning questions. If you're able to do that, great. But also, if your argument is just that there's a right to, like, let's say, freedom of something, something, so this person should have. Firstly, that right is flowing from a particular constitution, and the argument or the question did not tell you that. A lot of people make these kind of arguments. You can say that equality is like a principle that we should be functioning on, or you can make those kind of arguments. And if even if you want to say that there's a right to equality, just like don't like hedge your bets on that argument, because I don't think those are the kind of arguments that are necessarily looking for in this. Even like this one past year question, which was about discrimination, gender discrimination and equality, it was contingent in the company's own discrimination policy. It was not contingent on a constitutional principle of equality. So that was the fact that was given. And that's why I was able to argue that. Since they take the question paper back, are we allowed to mark the relevant facts? I would say marking on the question paper is generally not allowed. So don't do that. Will we have to put some facts in the answer which is given in question, or we have to give some different related facts? No, in the legal reasoning answer, don't give anything other than the facts in the question. Like in the sense, don't use random daily life examples or anything. It'll just take more time, space, and not needed. If I'm starting to prepare for part B and I think of writing an essay on humanitarian crisis emanates from war, so how should I go about? Should I start writing about any knowledge about it or first research and then write about, because in actual exam I have to be spontaneous. So I know that you want to be spontaneous in the exam, in the sense that if there's a topic that you didn't prepare for, you want to be able to think about that right there. But it doesn't hurt to like think of as much topics while you're preparing as you can. Like you don't have to sit for like 15 minutes with each topic, or like half an hour, write an essay, perfect an essay, memorize it and go. In the sense that you can just be like, you want a break right now, or in the sense, or you don't want to be in front of your screen. Think of a topic, think of like in your head, just think of pros, cons. And as long as you're able to like just map that out mentally. Another thing that helps me with part or like essays usually, that I just take 1 minute or like half a minute, and I like make just on the margins, I just write the major headings I want. Like if there are 3 pros in my head, I'll just write it down. If there are like 3 cons in my head, I'll just write them down. So yeah, if that helps anyone, because I know while writing I can forget, but if like I've structured it already, it helps me. How to get better at comprehension reading? Honestly, learn how to skim, because a lot of times you'll have to do a second reading of the comprehension after you read your questions, like specific reading for your questions to find the answer. My first reading of the comprehension, I do only to be able to identify the main argument, the premise, and where the information lies. So if it's a factual information based on, let's say this passage is about some kind of technology this technology utilizes, and there are 4 options. It's a factual, and I know where exactly in the passage I can find it. So while reading it, I might not like necessarily read the line, I might just skim over it, but I know where to find it if a question like that arises. So that helps me cut down on time. Part be approachable in 2 months. It is, even if you're like, there's a lot of non-art students in my batch. And since it was the first time we gave the exam, we literally had nothing to like know what to expect about. And still people did well in part B. In fact, they did like better than a lot of art students who I know didn't make it through. So in that scenario, that it's just that like I said, just be able to like use those facts, use that part of your brain which knows how to work with facts instead of like analysis and information. Because being able to use the facts well is a very good skill for part B. I was not able to finish part A in 1 hour. So I took 1 hour, 15 minutes to finish that. So do take that time. Um, yeah. I have read the question, most of the questions. Now, just like I'll spend these last 5 to 6 minutes on like just how do you know? Okay, so now having said everything about all of these topics, in a sense that like all of the parts that you need to cover, how do you deal with each part, what is important in each part, just like last 5 minutes I'll spend on, so how do you prep in these last 2 months? How would I prep if I was you? If you're someone who's starting today, having known whatever you know about this pattern, write down what you think will be the part where you'd struggle the most. Look at past questions for that. If it's a part A component, then look at the samples that are out there. if writing is what you think you'll struggle with most, write an answer or give a mock and think and then see how you did there and move from there. I think right now is not the time where you be like, okay, 1 week I'll spend on this, 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 then I'll give a mock and see. No, I think that is not like, I think the best way to prep is to first give a mock, see what you need prep with, and then prep that. Because why would you prep something that you're already like fairly decent at, right? So move from there. Um, After that, give yourself a week to get better at that. Give component mocks, in the sense that if part B is when I'm struggling, just give like frequent, like in every 3-4 days, give a part A mock. If part B is where you're struggling every 3-4, I think that requires a little more frequent practice with writing. So like every 2 days, give a mock. In the meantime, like I think part B, if you're struggling, you'll have to at least do two questions daily. Like in the exam, you have 7 to 8 minutes for a question, approximately, right? Um, 6 questions, 10 marks each, seven. Then you have the essay. And if you work around 1 hour, at best, you'll have 1 hour, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 15 minutes. Might have as less as 1 hour, 5 minutes. So yeah, you have around 7 to 8 minutes only for questions. Some questions you'll need to do in 5 minutes. Some questions will take you 8 to 9 minutes. So based on that, so yeah, also one more thing, don't like stick 7 to 8 per question. So only like I will spend the whole 7 minutes. If you can do it in five, finish in five. There will be questions that will take more time. Then is there a way to balance CUET law? Very different patterns. I know that both the exams are around the same time, but like it's very different patterns. Like sure, reasoning, GK can be done. There's both to be done, but Part B NLSAT will require you to do like a little more separate prep than CUET prep. Having said that, though, I'm going to assume your DU, like your undergrad exams will be after, final exams will be after the entrances. So right now you can afford to like just put that aside and just focus on entrances. Same with this, like if you're starting prep right now, 2 months, if you just focus on this, it's more than enough time. Sorry, back to what I was saying. Part B prep, yeah, it's not hard to like take out half an hour to 1 hour daily just to write, 1 hour daily just to read the editorial. And I don't say like read the editorial in the sense that all GK will come from there, but I personally find the editorial a very good place to like develop all the components of this paper, because you read the editorial, you realize that, right, they also have a very limited space to write, right? In the newspaper, you don't get like unlimited space to write, but they're able to convey their views on a topic and the facts and issues on a topic in that limited space. So it's very good, like just to see how that's written and then model that. And apart from it helping with GK, also think of it as like reading comprehension practices. In fact, a lot of RCs come from newspapers or books and things like that. Okay, I think with that, I am mostly done on my end. There's like a last few questions that I'll address. This is supposed to be a shorter session. I'm so sorry, guys. It took me a lot more time. Struggling with writing and how to make it more convincing and correct. So I think the structure and like how do you time to think, right? It does take time to think. And if like an essay, so legal reasoning, if I'm saying we need 7 to 8 minutes for an answer, a good 2 to 3 minutes is just taking time to figure out the argument you want to make. And to take that time to think, usually, like if you hurry in the start and then you make a mistake in the kind of argument you're making, then writing won't help. Like uh writing fast maybe is something you need practice with, but taking some time to think is the smart way to go. Because if you're clear in your head about what you want to write, then writing it doesn't take time. Can you share a few sample essays? So I think this is someone from NLTI who has asked, can I share a few sample essays um in to the enrolled students? Sure, it'll take me some time. I'm a little unwell right now, but we can do that. What will be the right pattern to write a good legal answer? Uh, okay, for legal answer patterns, just begin with like first sentence, what side are you picking? I know a lot of people give some facts and like, or they just give reasoning and then in the end say this is the side that I'm picking. I usually think it's smartest to just like this, like the examiner know right off the bat, you picked which side, or you decided in the favor of whom, or whose arguments do you think merit was. However, the question is framed, because like directly that is how they'll begin reading. They know exactly what you're going to do. Uh, After that, while I don't number my answers, it's just like I would, in this situation, I would rule in favor of this X person because, like, oh, hi, yeah, then I'll, because next paragraph, first paragraph, this shows that this was done, and this clearly shows intent, or this clearly shows an attempt to do this, and there's nothing they could do, something, whatever. One reason explained in one paragraph, next paragraph, second reason explained there. That's it. Best to keep it simple. So you might face a situation in the essay where you just don't know enough on the topic to write. And I think that's the worst case scenario, right? But I mean, in those situations, the best you can do is just identify like I said, identify the social issue at the core of it. There's going to be some social issue, and and just emphasize on that. I think that in those situations, that's the best you can do, because it's impossible to predict every combination or every possible question out there. You might, and it's okay to like just also be like go in with the fact that there might be a question you know absolutely nothing about. The essay makes it difficult because it's a major component. But having said that, you might do a, a not as well job as you thought you would. But if you're able to identify one or two core issues or one or two stakeholders and just elaborate on that, you're doing enough to like not put you down too much. So that's what I try to do in those situations. Okay. Um, okay, then all the best, guys. Everyone who all the best for your prep for these last 2 months. And I hope all the best. And I hope to see you next year as juniors.